In the autumn of 1069, smoke rose over northern England. Most histories say this was the moment the north was broken. But imagine this instead. The fires never came, and York did not fall. On this channel, we explore history not as a list of dates, but as a sequence of decisions. Moments where restraint mattered more than bravery, where systems mattered more than kings, and where the future quietly turned, long before anyone noticed. This story is not really about York. It is about something far larger. It is about what happens when conquest stalls, when a system built on speed, fear, and submission suddenly meets a boundary it cannot cross. And why, if the Normans had never conquered York, England might never have become the centralized kingdom we recognize today. Because history does not only change when something happens, it also changes when something fails to happen at exactly the wrong time. To understand why York mattered, we have to step back. England in 1066 was not a unified nation. It was a patchwork of regions with different loyalties, different laws, and different memories. The South had long looked toward the continent. The North looked across the North Sea. For generations, York had been shaped by Scandinavia. Its rulers, its trade routes, even its legal customs carried the imprint of Danish power. The Danelaw was not a footnote. It was a living system, and systems resist sudden change. When William of Normandy crossed the Channel and defeated Harold at Hastings, his victory was real but incomplete. He had broken the English royal army. He had not conquered England. What William inherited was not obedience. It was uncertainty. Southern nobles submitted quickly, calculating that survival mattered more than pride. But the North did not calculate the same way. York was different. He was distant from London, protected by rivers, surrounded by communities that remembered foreign kings and preferred them. And most importantly, the North had options. If pressure came from the South, they could look east, to Denmark. Two old alliances that still breathed beneath the surface. William understood this. He did not march north immediately. He paused. He consolidated. He built castles not as symbols but as infrastructure nodes of control designed to outlast rebellion. This was how Norman power worked. Not with endless battles, but with pressure over time. But pressure cuts both ways. Every delay gave the North time to organize. Every castle in the South reminded the North what submission would cost. And by 1069, resistance was no longer theoretical, it was organized. In our familiar history, this is where everything collapses. A rebellion flares in York. Norman garrisons are attacked. Danish ships appear on the coast, and William responds with absolute destruction. The harrying of the North. Fields burned. Villages erased. Food systems dismantled. An entire region punished not to win loyalty but to remove the possibility of resistance forever. It worked, but only just. Now imagine one change. Not a heroic victory, not a miracle, just restraint. In this version of history, William hesitates not because he is merciful, but because the system around him forces caution. His treasury is strained. Norman lords are restless. Castles in the South still require manpower. A full-scale scorched earth campaign in the North is expensive, logistically complex, and politically risky. And so instead of unleashing devastation, William chooses containment. He reinforces York, negotiates with select northern elites, allows Danish forces to withdraw in exchange for tribute. York remains formally unconquered, unbroken, unharried. It is a compromise, and compromises in history are dangerous. At first, the decision seems reasonable. The rebellion quiets. No new armies march south. Norman authority holds on paper, but beneath the surface, the system begins to fracture. Norman rule was built on momentum. Every victory made the next one easier. Every display of force discouraged resistance elsewhere. York breaks that rhythm. Northern lords notice something important. William can be resisted and survived. They begin to adapt, not with open revolt, but with delay, with legal ambiguity, with selective obedience. Taxes arrive late. Military obligations are negotiated, not assumed. Norman sheriffs find their authority challenged by local assemblies that still remember older laws. And crucially, the North remains culturally distinct. The Norman language does not fully penetrate. Church appointments remain contested. Monasteries maintain Scandinavian ties. This is not rebellion, it is insulation. And insulation is far harder to destroy than armies. William faces a dilemma. To crush the North now would require more force than before. The moment for swift terror has passed. But to tolerate this semi-independence threatens the entire Norman project. Because if the North can remain different, so can others. Mercia watches closely. The Welsh borders test limits. Even Norman barons begin to ask questions. What exactly did they conquer? William does not lose England, but he never truly owns it. Without the harrying of the North, the economic devastation that followed never occurs. York remains a functioning trade hub. Northern agriculture recovers faster. Population decline is avoided. This matters. A wealthy North can fund resistance. It can support alternative power centers. It can negotiate instead of submit. Over time, England becomes structurally divided. The South grows more Norman feudal, centralized, castle-bound. The North evolves differently, communal, law-focused, outward-looking. The monarchy adapts by necessity. Rather than imposing uniform rule, English kings learn to bargain. Royal authority becomes contractual, not absolute. The Doomsday Book still exists, but it is incomplete. Northern lands resist total survey. Knowledge itself becomes fragmented. This England does not centralize quickly, it pluralizes, and that changes everything. Without a fully subdued north, later English kings inherit limits. There is no assumption that royal will overrides local custom. No precedent for total regional annihilation. When conflicts arise between crown and nobility, the memory of northern resistance lingers. Magna Carta still happens, but earlier, and with broader support. Not as a rebellion, but as a negotiation rooted in precedent. England's relationship with Scotland changes as well. A strong autonomous north forms cultural bridges instead of hardened borders. Wars still occur, but conquest becomes harder to justify. Even the English language evolves differently. Without total Norman dominance, Old English survives more intact. Legal and administrative language remains mixed, not overwritten. England becomes a kingdom defined by balance, not control. Slower to act, harder to dominate, but more resilient. All because one city was not destroyed when it could have been. History often celebrates decisive force, but just as often, it is restraint that reshapes the future. If York had never been conquered, England would not have collapsed. It would have bent into something quieter, more complex and harder to rule. And perhaps that is the most dangerous outcome of all. If you could change one moment in history, not with victory, but with hesitation, what would it be? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more stories where history diverges, not with explosions, but with decisions, consider subscribing.